Paul Newman, the icon with Hollywood's immortal blue eyes. The man who once made the whole world believe he had a perfect family, an eternal love with the actress Joanne Woodward. But behind those beautiful photos, behind those radiant smiles on the red carpet, there existed a truth that was never acknowledged. At age 63, Nell Newman, the daughter of the legend, decided to break the silence. In a shocking interview, she confirmed the rumors that the public had only dared to whisper about for many years. Rumors that Paul Newman had lived two lives, one for the Hollywood stage and one for the man he truly loved. Nell Newman recalls, from her childhood she never saw her parents hold hands, never witnessed a real embrace. It was all just staged moments in front of the cameras, like two tired actors trying to complete one final scene. Paul Newman, the man who once made half the world's women swoon, was as cold as ice in his own home. Joanne Woodward, gentle and talented, gradually became a shadow, quietly enduring. And the children, they grew up amid beautiful framed photos, but with hearts that were utterly empty. In the luxurious villa in Westport, behind those magnificent windows, Nell, the little blonde girl, early on noticed the chill enveloping what seemed like a perfect home. She forever remembers the image of her father, Paul Newman, leaving the house at dawn every morning, with no one knowing where he went. And when he returned, he only gave a faint smile, then disappeared behind the door of his study. Nell also remembers those cold winter nights, the sound of a wine glass shattering from her mother's bedroom, Joanne kneeling on the floor holding a shard of glass, whispering in despair, "He's lying again, he's lying again." When Nell, trembling, asked, "What did Dad do?" Joanne only whispered softly, "Not every man loves women, my child. But Hollywood will never accept that." That was the first moment when Nell's tender heart shattered. And from then on, she understood that in this house, there were questions that were never allowed to be asked. But not everyone in the family accepted the silence. The eldest son, Scott Newman, broke that unwritten rule. Scott, who was once expected to carry on his father's glorious legacy, became the most painful reflection. He saw clearly the voids between his father and mother. He heard his mother cry at night. He felt the cold indifference of his legendary father. And then, he asked out loud, "Who are you really, Dad?" That question was like a knife tearing through the veil of secrecy. But in return, Scott received rejection. When his friends mocked him, saying, "Ask if your dad likes men or women," Scott got angry, beat up his friend until he was expelled from school. Paul Newman didn't show up, only sent a lawyer along with money to settle it. No words of comfort, no hug. Scott became more and more lost. He turned to alcohol, drugs, not for fun, but to erase the feeling of abandonment. Until 1978, they found him in a small apartment in Los Angeles, unconscious, next to a few pills and half a bottle of liquor. The death was recorded as suicide by overdose. But in Nell's eyes, the truth was far more painful. Scott didn't die from drugs. He died from silence. He died because no one dared to answer the question he carried throughout his life. Did Dad ever truly love anyone? And if so, what were we in his life? After the heartbreaking death of Scott Newman, the veil of secrecy around Paul Newman began to lift more, and what Nell Newman witnessed made her unable to forget. One winter night in 1981, Nell, then only 22, quietly passed by her father's study. Golden light spilled from the crack in the door, and she saw him writing. Not a movie script, not work papers, but a letter. The first line made Nell freeze. "Dear Red, the one who reminds me that I am still human, not just an icon." Red here was Robert Redford, the co-star who once stood shoulder to shoulder with Newman in the masterpiece Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. In the letter, Paul wrote about Redford's eyes in the Utah desert, about the nights the two drank on the hotel rooftop, saying nothing, but that silence held an undeniable truth. "If one day you look at me like that again, I'm ready to give up everything, fame, family, even Hollywood." Ladies and gentlemen, just imagine an icon of American masculinity, a model husband in the public's eyes, writing those trembling lines to another man. But Robert Redford wasn't the only name. There was also Gore Vidal, the writer, political activist, a close friend of the family for over 20 years. Nell clearly remembers one evening at the Carlisle Hotel in New York. She accidentally saw her father stepping out from the hallway. Beside him wasn't Joanne, but Gore Vidal. Gore's hand lightly touched Paul's wrist, their eyes lingering on each other longer than normal. When he noticed his daughter, Paul said nothing, only looked at her as if pleading, "Don't say it, please." From that day, Gore appeared more frequently, calls at 2 a.m., business trips without explanation, old photos of the two sitting by the lake, leaning back against each other, gazes distant but with quiet affection. Joanne Woodward, the wife praised as the lighthouse of intelligence and fidelity, finally admitted in a moment of weakness, "There are things no one teaches us how to name, but they still exist, even when we pretend to forget." Hollywood at that time, of course, would never accept this truth. The public only saw the gentle smiles and immortal roles, but in the shadows, there were unspoken romances, names only abbreviated in a secret notebook. R.G., or sometimes just two letters, R.R. After those secret letters and unnamed meetings, the seemingly indestructible marriage of Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward began to crack openly. Joanne, the woman once seen as the icon of intelligence and Hollywood pride, chose silence for decades. But that silence didn't mean forgiveness. It was like a festering wound, growing deeper each day, until it could no longer be hidden. One winter night, Joanne received an anonymous call. "If you still care about your marriage, go to the Mayflower Hotel, room 708. That very evening, she dropped all her schedules and flew back to Westport. Meanwhile, Paul Newman lied that he was meeting a script partner in New York. But the truth, the man in that room was none other than Robert Redford. No one knows exactly what happened in room 708. But when Joanne returned home, her face pale, arms marked with bruises, and eyes red from crying, it said everything. From that day, the already silent villa in Westport now echoed with different sounds, shattering objects, the collapse of trust, not arguments, but heavy silences that were suffocating. Paul Newman, from a man who once vowed to quit smoking to please his wife, now started again. He sat for hours on the porch, eyes vacant in the night. Sometimes, just a small action, like Nell accidentally dropping a Beatles record, was enough to make him furious, smashing the crystal vase that Joanne had cherished. And Joanne, she became a shadow, wandering the house like a lost soul. After that night, she never called her husband honey or my love again. And when reporters asked about Robert Redford, Joanne only replied with two cold words, "That person." No name, no emotion, no memories, only an endless distance. Ladies and gentlemen, their marriage, once hailed by all of America as the standard, turned out to be just a stage. Two great actors performed their roles for 50 years, but behind the curtain, they were just exhausted people because of things they couldn't say. And then, as Joanne began to sink into the darkness of Alzheimer's, memories gradually leaving her, there was one thing she could never forget: the look Paul Newman gave to others, the look she had never received in her entire life. On September 26, 2008, Paul Newman took his last breath at the home in Westport. All of America fell silent. Television replayed his immortal films. Newspapers published a series of tributes, praising him as a complete legend. But just 3 days later, a phone call from the lawyer's office made the Newman family collapse. Nell Newman, the daughter who once managed the environmental branch of the Newman's own charity, opened the mailbox and discovered the harsh truth. Her mother's name, Joanne Woodward, along with the 6 children, had completely disappeared from the will. The entire enormous fortune, over $600 million, including the famous salad dressing brand, was transferred to a legal entity called Newman's Own Foundation. The head of that organization, not his wife, not his children, but Robert Forrester, a longtime associate. Not only that, A leaked addendum revealed plans to establish a separate fund called Quiet Legacy. The first beneficiary, no one else, was only abbreviated with 2 letters, R. The public immediately stirred. Could that be Robert Redford? Could the relationship that all of Hollywood had whispered about now be imprinted in the legend's final document? Joanne, now sinking into Alzheimer's forgetfulness, no longer had the ability to fight back. The children, including Nell, were excluded from controlling the fund, not even allowed to sit on the board. Outsiders became the legal owners, while blood relatives became outsiders. What made everyone shudder was not just the division of assets. It was the absolute coldness. In the will, there was an ironclad clause. Anyone in the family who dared to object would lose even the small remaining portion, like a threat, like an iron door locked tight, not allowing anyone to question. Nell once said through tears, "We didn't just lose our father. We lost the chance to know who he really was." Because that will wasn't just a legal document. It was like a stone tablet carving deeper, a circle of silence, burying the truth that Paul Newman took to his grave. A leaked source from a former employee of the lawyer's office revealed, just a few months before signing the final will, Paul Newman had handwritten a letter to Joanne. In it, he admitted his fear of not being lucid enough to correct mistakes and begged her to forgive if anything went wrong later. That letter never appeared in the legal files. It disappeared mysteriously. And then, in 2021, a former assistant of Joanne suddenly found another letter, tucked inside the book The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, the book the couple once considered a spiritual keepsake. The handwriting was trembling, but clearly Paul Newman's. "Dear Joanne, if I am no longer lucid enough to say this, please believe these lines. Everything belongs to you. Name, career, and the reason I exist. If something goes wrong, please believe it was not my choice. I love you until the last minute." A letter full of love and remorse, but with no legal value. It was like a final cry, buried under layers of papers, power, and hands that arranged everything. This raises a harsh question. Was Paul Newman no longer of sound mind when he signed the will? Was someone taking advantage of his weakened health to control the final decisions? Or was he, to the very end, a torn man between secret loves, family responsibilities, and the fear of exposure? To Nell, those letters were like the final pieces in a painful game. She said, "We may lose the assets, lose the legacy, but what we cannot bear is losing the truth. Who did Dad love? Who did he live for? And what were we in his heart?" Joanne, once called by the world the icon of intelligence, grace, and fidelity, was gradually robbed of her memory by Alzheimer's. She forgot her daughter's birthday, forgot the names of close friends, forgot the Broadway spotlight or the golden Oscar statue she once held. Yet, there was one thing she never forgot. It was the look Paul Newman gave to others. In moments of half awake, half dreaming, Joanne whispered to her daughter Nell, "Do you know the way your father looked at Gore? Or at Robert Redford? He never gave to me. Even if I forget everything, I can never forget that look." That confession was like a knife twisting deeper into the family's heart, because it proved that, through decades of silence, Joanne wasn't blind. She knew. She felt it clearly, but she chose to live with it, to preserve the fragile image of a perfect family in the public's eyes. Her whole life she was an outstanding actress, but the longest, most painful role was the happy wife she was forced to play in real life. When illness erased all memories, only one scar remained that never vanished, a scar named betrayal. Joanne passed away quietly, leaving behind an image both noble and painful, a woman who sacrificed her youth and honor to protect her husband's image, but in the end carried the obsession that the love she received was never complete. Dear viewers, from here the story takes another turn, because after Joanne's death, and Paul already at rest, everything seemed to close. But no, it was Paul Newman's final will, along with unexplained secrets, that turned this legendary family into a battlefield of law and ethics. Paul Newman's final will, signed just 6 weeks before his death, erased the names of his wife and 6 children. The entire fortune, estimated at over $600 million, was given to Newman's own foundation, under the absolute control of Robert Forrester, a longtime associate. The family, who believed they would continue to carry Paul's spiritual legacy, were stunned to find themselves sidelined. Not only that, the will had an ironclad clause. Anyone in the family who dared to object would lose even the small remaining share, like a cold blade locking away any hope of reversal. Yet secrets gradually emerged. Leaked medical records showed that from 2007, Paul Newman had signs of memory decline, disorientation, and impaired judgment. By May 2008, 3 months before signing the will, he was even diagnosed as temporarily lacking legal capacity. So why was the will still approved? Who really guided the pen in his hand? An anonymous witness revealed to Vanity Fair, "I once saw a handwritten letter from Paul to Joanne in which he affirmed all assets would belong to her. But that letter was never included in the files." Could that be evidence that the final will was just a product of manipulation? The more investigated, the more the press called it the biggest legacy theft Hollywood has ever seen. The Wall Street Journal directly asked, who really stood behind Paul Newman's will? Meanwhile, Robert Forrester, the one in control, quickly raised his own salary, cut budgets for many projects the Newman family had cherished, and completely removed members from the board. From a charity fund named after a legend, Newman's own now became a closed fortress, where even his own relatives were barred from entering. Nell Newman, the daughter once trusted by her father to manage the environmental branch, said in pain, "I never demanded a single penny, but I cannot accept them turning my father into a tool and my mother into someone invisible." In 2021, in the private library at the Westport home, a former assistant of Joanne found an old letter hidden inside the book The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. This wasn't a legal document, not evidence that could reverse the will, but it was the final piece to see the true heart of a legend. The letter read, "Dear Joanne, if I am no longer lucid enough to say this, then believe these lines. Everything belongs to you, from name, career, to the reason I exist today. If something goes wrong, please believe it was not my choice. I love you until the last minute." Can you feel it, ladies and gentlemen? Those trembling lines are like the final sigh of a man who lived his life in torment. On one side, the family, wife and children, whom he never truly opened up to. On the other, the secrets, unspoken loves, gazes only written in handwritten letters. For Nell, this letter didn't erase the pain, nor return the years of abandonment, but it gave her proof that, somewhere deep in his heart, her father still thought of the family, still regretted the things he never dared to reveal. In a 2023 interview, Nell said slowly, "There are things that can't be reclaimed with papers, but I believe my father left the truth somewhere. Maybe he wanted us to find it. Maybe he waited for us to forgive." That letter didn't change the will, couldn't return hundreds of millions of dollars to the Newman family, but it left another legacy, a spiritual one. A belated confession that, despite living a life in silence, Paul Newman still longed to be loved and carried an unquenchable remorse. And it is that spiritual legacy that torments people the most, because money can be lost, power can be fought for, but a heartfelt word, if never spoken, becomes an eternal wound. Nell Newman, at age 63, has broken that wall of silence. She didn't do it to tarnish her father's name. She did it so the world understands that behind the glamour, the seemingly greatest people can also leave the deepest wounds for their loved ones. And the message that we, especially the generation that has gone through decades of change, can draw is, don't let the truth die with you. Because a true word, even bitter, is better than a lifetime of silence that leaves loved ones in torment, doubt, and regret. What do you think? Was Paul Newman truly happy choosing silence? Was the greatest legacy he left for his family the assets or the void that can never be filled? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Because this story isn't just about a Hollywood star, but a reminder for all of us that the courage to live truthfully is the greatest gift we can give to those we love. If you feel this video deserves to be heard, please subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share so more people can know the hidden truth behind a legend's glamour. Goodbye. See you in the next videos.